argument for reaching some type of consensus in Kyoto, in Paris next days. So that's a straightforward, especially for those populations who are along the coastlines and those countries along the Caribbean.
Okay, thank you. Just the third question will be how access to water is measured. Is it just for drinking water or any kind of water?
Say that again, please.
Yeah, it says how access to water is measured. Is it just for drinking water or any kind of water?
Okay, how the access to water is measured? You are hitting a super important point regarding this. There is no an exact methodology or a standard for measuring the water extraction. I have done some studies in the past for several countries, and it is very difficult because the amount of data available for water extraction is very limited. This is something that it is in some way being managed by some people who has been extracting water, especially from the aquifers, in a not very clear or legal type of way. I know that there are several countries. I'm coming from Costa Rica. I know that the Costa Rican government has done a lot of work on systematizing the permits for extracting water and paying for that water. And so they have been now a database very detailed regarding the amount of water that is being extracted. But there is no standard. If you take a look of some of the reports, for example, the World Water that is being published by the Pacific Institute or for some UN statistics, there are some estimations with a lot of notes to the margins of the publications regarding how this water is being extracted. So it is not only for accessing water for human consumption, is this access that is shared by agriculture sector, by industry sector, and some other uses. But basically, what is well understood is that almost 70% of the water access of the world is for agriculture sector.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the next one will be I would like to know more about purification of water. So the question is, how is the purifying water sector working in the Americas? Is there enough supply of this process in Americas?
Well, that's also very interesting. Very interesting. I think that now there is more opening in the sector. Why? Because what happened in the past is that most of the methods that were used were centralized by large companies that normally depends on government budget in order to do so. There are still countries, many of them, especially small countries, that still have decentralized systems, but also now they believe that the need for purification water, especially for supply, is necessary to have it at smaller scales, especially in rural zones. So municipalities are taking more a visible job and work, and they are doing a lot of work on that regard. But it's still, I would say that in general in the Americas, the supply sector and associated purification and potable water consumption is pretty much still on hands of the governments and countries. And the reason why is that the investment necessary for maintaining these systems is very high. Normally, these companies work not only on the potable water consumption, but also on sanitation. And so this is an equation that sometimes works very, very difficult, but basically the governments are the one who invest the most. In cases like the United States or Canada, in which a lot of private companies do these services, they have been proven that they are work. But also, governments has a lot to facilitate as incentives in order for those companies to become profitable at some point.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can wait a few seconds more so we can receive more questions.
I would like to hear if they have some type of ideas for these innovations on agriculture. On potable water, I think that people had it more clear, especially for small communities. But for agriculture, I would like to hear more of what they have thinking that could be useful, especially now that I mentioned to you that this is strong dependence on climate, understanding the climate before jumping into this type of thing.
Okay, yes, now we have a follow-up question of the last one. It says, how feasible is the purification of water for future demand of water?
How feasible this is? That's something for a business research in some way. I cannot tell you how feasible it is. But I think that for certain size of communities, this could be an interesting approach. There are different categories in which we could have this. Purification of water being harvested is one interesting thing. I know that, for example, in Mexico City, in this large city, some buildings already have a lot of water, produce a lot of water harvesting, and they use this water not purified for human consumptions, but for some of the services that they provide along the building. That's an interesting business approach and economy for the owners of the complex. So, but I think that there is, I would say there is I venture to say that there is some possibilities. There are some space, but this will depend especially on the size of the community or the target group that you would like to address.
Okay, Jess, we just received another one. It says, regarding agriculture and its access to water, is there any forecast that can tell us if agriculture is going to be affected by the access of water?
Oh yes, it is because I just was having a Skype conference too with colleagues in Peru a couple of weeks ago, and it was very interesting because we were talking the competing uses between water for agriculture, water for energy, and water for the mining companies or the mining sector. And it is very evident that water is now the basic for everything. And so there is not necessary to make a large assessment on that. Agriculture is going to be under the pressure because water for irrigation is used very inefficiently, and this is something which requires a lot of innovation. Why not to use less water like it happens in many parts like in Israel or some other places that use certain techniques in order to be very efficient with the use of water. We are not saying that this is the technique that we need to use in Peru or in Mexico or in Argentina, but something that could use less water so the competing uses cannot deal with some type of conflicts at some point between sectors or parts of society.
Okay, thank you. Uh, the next one will be, how is the Americas facing the sustainable infrastructure regarding the consumption of water and the concern of saving water? What countries are still on the way to operate with the sustainable infrastructure?
Okay, that's also a very interesting question. There are countries, let me say Costa Rica, Uruguay, I see that Chile is one that too. They're doing a lot of effort, especially in the nexus between energy and water, to improve the use of renewable waters. So their infrastructure is becoming very solid. But there are another countries which are not that innovative regarding uses of water for producing energy, so their infrastructure is kind of old and so on. I'm not going to mention countries in particular on that regard, but there are and there are a lot, and especially in the energy sector. So their low investment in renewables associated to, say, hydropower, things like this, even though they have the potential and capacity to do so, are so limited that they give space to more fossil fuels type of energy production. So they are more pollutants, and they have to, every time that the oil prices rises, so they struggle with their economy, and especially if this is a poor country, it's becoming poorest, and the social problems start arising. Beside that, if you take another sector into consideration, for example, the potable water, the plants for producing potable water, um, there are, I think that all countries are trying to catch up with the demand. But still, you see on the news, and you just take a look at 2 or 3 countries you could take on the news, even though they are trying to catch up, they are limited because the population is becoming more urban dependent on water pipelines, and the demand is growing. So this is a mixed type of response. There are some countries which are facing this infrastructure challenge with some possibilities, but there are others that does not. And the main factor here, which needs to be taken into account, is that the debt that the countries can or are allowed to have regarding the international banks has a ceiling. And many of these countries has already reached this top. So the possibilities to invest in new infrastructure, which are normally very expensive, and this is why most of the governments are the ones who are carrying the load of that, is very limited. So they have to go to another sources which are not the traditional sources with preferential loans. And so the debt grows a lot with all the implications in the economy that they have. So I say that for the Americas, even though we have plenty of water, we need to use it wisely. So what we are planning here with these 2 topics is to be creative in a sense that how come through my innovation and my innovative ideas could lower the load on my grid for water demand. So we could have still certain space without taking a more debt that created more economic problems to my country. And I think that this question is key in the factor of understanding how the system works.
Oh, okay. Let's wait just a few seconds more so we can receive more questions. Yes, we have one. You mentioned the relation between water and the production of food. The question is, in the future, will food be a crucial factor to address in the Americas?
Yes, it is. For the world. Because the more people we are, the more food we demand. And the more food we demand, the more land without great amount of water availability. Remember that one of the things that I told you is the water distribution. Even though we have this 45% of water from the world in the Americas, remember that I told you also that this is not well distributed. So there are regions with a lot of water, and there are regions with scarce water. So in some places, we are going to expand our territories for food productivity to areas in which we need irrigation. So I think that food production is going to be a major determinant also for the Americas. So that is where the opportunity jumps into the young minds of you guys. So you could start thinking in how to work in new system for irrigations, for expanding toward lands in which normally are not expensive lands, in which we could have some type of crops that could be useful for cities and so on, or some techniques. Sometimes we could think in small projects, but remember that very small projects could lead us on to small changes. We could think in large productivities and in association of several ideas that could help us to catch up with this demand of more food for the future.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have one question. It says, what is the role of the Americas with other continents regarding the almost 50% of water in the world? What's going to happen with this clear difference in the future of water consumption? Is there any forecast or situation?
Yes, there's an interesting position that because we are as an organization of American states, we are in a space for dialogue between among the countries on different issues, and the issue of development and water is one of them. And we believe that having the possibility that the next World Water Forum in 2018 is going to be in Brasilia, in Brazil, there is an opportunity for us as a continent to promote a rationale that could lead us to our water convention. It's like a water agreement on uses, and we are going to start promoting some of the common things that we understand and believe that could be useful. So, and we will invite the rest of the world to join us in some way. Remember that things like the human right to water came from Bolivia, a country from our region, from our hemisphere. Bolivia was the country that promoted in the World Water Forum of Istanbul some years ago the issue of water as a human right. Then it went through the UN, and now is a binding type of agreement among countries. Okay, so I think that the American has to invite the rest of the world and on do better management. Integrated water resources management came from the Air Summit from Brazil. So in some way, Americas has been always produced a lot of thoughts on water management, transboundary aquifers management. Again, the Americas. So I think that having almost half of the water of the world implies certain responsibility. And I think that some of the things that we have to approach with more determination is how to manage this water wisely so we could catch up with demand, understanding that the water is climate dependent and this climate is changing, so water is going to change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campos. We will wait just a few more seconds so we can know if there is another question. Well, I don't know if you, Mr. Campos, would like to add something before.
I think that the honest thing to do here is that we have been not covering everything that we wish to cover because the time is limited, and also the possibility for people to be connected is limited. But they have my email, I hope, or you could pass it to them, which is mcampos@oas.org. So I would be more than pleased with my team to be at your service in any specifics. If you would like to share some ideas in which we could have awards, at least to tell you that's good it is, or some approach that we could note, or some contacts that we could make for you, that would be we will be more than happy. I think that the top topics being selected by the EcoReto this year are fundamental for the future of water management in the Americas, and especially the issue of agriculture, and as I show you the big challenges that we are facing, the limitations in investment, limitations in infrastructure, and so on. So we need to jump with some new ideas and solutions. I think that the young entrepreneurs are the ones who really could dictate the future on water management in the Americas.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campos. I think we have no more questions for this webinar. So I think this is the end of the presentation. Thank you for having explained us this important topic, and thanks to the audience for sending the questions that can help young entrepreneurs to participate in the Eco Challenge category of TIC Americas. Thank you again, Mr. Campos, for joining us today, and thank you to the audience again.
Thanks to you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.